Welcome to the desert city of Rhaenyr. This city is definitely one of my largest projects I've ever built in Minecraft. It's a giant kingdom that spans across this desert, and it's complete with sugarcane farms, a port for ships, towers, temples, and an ancient statue of a woman who is said to watch the sea and guard the city from any invaders or threats. This is actually the first Minecraft world that I used for content on this channel. This world includes other places in it, like the village of Ashira, the ruins of Rhaenyr, Soulstone Fortress, and more. I'm gonna give a small world tour at the end of this video, but for now, we're returning to the city of Rhaenyr because I never got around to fully completing the city, and I want to do that. I also wanted to make some small changes to the city, and most importantly, I want to add a giant temple outside of its walls. So if you're interested in seeing the city of Rhaenyr finally completed, and in learning about how you can download this world and explore everything in it for yourself, stick around until the end of the video where I'll tell you all about that. But for now, let's jump right in and begin the city transformation. The first thing that I wanted to do in transforming the city was to add some variety to the color of the buildings. I did this by mixing in some prismarine blocks, red nether bricks, and mangrove wood into the roofs of the houses. I also did the same thing with the temples and the towers and all of the buildings in the city. I really like how much more colorful these roofs are and how vibrant they make the city feel. It's a lot closer to the image of Rhaenyr that I had in my head when I first started building this project so many years ago. Then it was time to extend the city walls. I wanted to envelop this sugarcane farm so that it wasn't completely exposed to the desert. I also cut out an entryway in the walls to add a sort of back entrance to the city. More importantly though, a path is going to lead through this entryway to the temple that I'm about to build. After I extended the city walls, I began to terraform the sand outside of the city to make a hill that our platform and the temple would sit on. I built the platform using a gradient of red and orange blocks, and then I filled it in with stone and andesite. Unfortunately though, I made a typo in World Edit and I accidentally filled like 10,000 blocks around me with sand, forcing the game to crash. I ended up having to manually clear an entire layer of sand in all of the chunks that were rendered around me. I felt crushed at this point, so it seems like a good time to talk about the inspiration for this build while I'm busy fixing my mistake. 7,000 years ago, a city named Aruk existed. Rising above the city of Aruk, a white temple was constructed. It was called the White Temple. It was built on a ziggurat, which is basically a big platform with stairs wrapping around the outside of it. The temple itself was incredibly bright, shining in the desert because of the white plaster material that it was made of, which made the temple look like it was glowing. I was inspired by these concepts to create my own temple for the city of Rhaenyr. Specifically, I wanted to raise my temple on a platform similar to the ziggurat that the White Temple is built on. I also wanted to use quartz blocks to make the temple appear to shine on the desert horizon above the city. In addition to this, I also wanted to make a second building. It's kind of a mixture between a greenhouse and a smaller temple, with some foliage inside of it along with hanging glowberries on the roofs. I also made some skylights in the roof to provide some natural light for all of the plants. For the first half of this build, I wasn't really sure what colors I wanted to use for the temple yet. You'll see me playing around with a few ideas and then changing them back. Eventually, I landed with keeping all of the roofs of the temple different shades of blue, to contrast the warm color of the walls. This temple area is a very spiritual and sacred place for the people of the city of Rhaenyr. I wanted the temple to stand tall on top of the platform, rising above the city, so that you can see it pretty much from wherever you are within the city. Once I had the basic composition done, I played around with some of the elevation to give some more variety to the entire height of the build. This really makes interacting with the entire space much more dynamic. With this change in elevation, I added some stairs in order to reach the higher section of the platform. This is also when I decided to change all of the color of the roofs to different shades of blue, using different prismarine blocks. Once I had those extra details ironed out, I added some foliage around the entire platform, in the form of leaves hanging off of the temple, trees outlining its sides, and foliage in the little garden sections that I have dividing the platform into walkways. I also wanted to edit the outer platform of the entire structure to make it a bit more interesting to look at. I did this by adding kind of walkways, complete with towers that had blue flames on the top of them to appear cohesive with the entire aesthetic of the build and of the city. I positioned both of these walkways behind the temple to offer a kind of back view to the surrounding landscape behind each build. I really love the extra space that these little walkways offer and the change in the silhouette that they give to the overall structure. After that, I came back outside of the temple to alter the terrain a little bit more, because I was soon going to add roads as well as foliage surrounding the entire structure. These roads are going to connect the temple and the city together, making everything feel much more cohesive. Along these roads, a lot of travel is happening, and I wanted to indicate that by adding some traveling carts being pulled by camels, along with some roadside market stalls people have set up to sell their goods to anyone that may be traveling between the temple and the city. I also added this stable that people can use to board their camels in case they've traveled a long way to visit the temple. This was really fun to do because it finally made everything feel much more connected. And honestly, I'm definitely open to coming back to this world in the future to add even more things in this area. To make this road feel as populated as I envisioned it in my head, I kept adding more market stalls complete with camels and more traveling carts along the entire path. Towards the entire center where the road diverges towards the temple, I added a larger market space with a campfire and some benches to show that people might stop here to take a rest on their journey. This entire space is already feeling so much better than I did before, but I wanted to add some more detailing to the foundation. I did this by carving these small archways into the upper orange portion along the walls. I added some foliage like sugarcane and bushes around the perimeter of the temple. This might feel kind of out of place in the desert, but I imagine that people have grown and taken care of these plants around the temple for centuries, and that's why they're thriving regardless of the hot and dry conditions of the desert. And finally, with that greenery in place around the structure, it was time to go inside of the temple and begin the interior decorations. First, I figured out the overall internal structure that I wanted for this space, and then I decorated it using an assortment of bookshelves, lecterns, armor stands, and pots. I also included soul lanterns, as well as some light-emitting blocks in the roofs and the walls of the structure, which I think really add to the mystical and sacred vibe that I want you to feel when you're walking into the temple. I did this for all 3 stories of the temple, and then I came back outside to add some more minor detailing around the entire space. And now that the temple is completed, this city feels so much cooler than it did before. The sight of the temple from within the city rising above the horizon is so cool. Now let's take a step back, or a few thousand steps back, and let's take a look at some of the other projects that I have in this world. Everything that I've built in this world is connected by paths and roads, so you can literally come into this world blind and you will be able to explore everything that I've built. This includes a village named Ashira, which is inspired by the Shire from The Lord of the Rings. This is the oldest project that I made for this channel, and you can go back and watch my very first video to see it in a bit more detail. Leaving the village of Ashira, we come upon the ruins of Rhaenyr, which are some ancient ruins in the desert that have been here for millennia, along the way to the city of Rhaenyr. Just like for the village of Ashira, you can see this build in more detail in some of the oldest videos on my channel. I really love how these ruins came out. They look so sick, and it's what eventually inspired me to start the city of Rhaenyr just down the road. But before we reach the city, we come upon this small market area that was built around an oasis. This oasis also offers a small tavern for travelers on their journey to stop and take a rest. And leaving this oasis, taking a right down the road diverging into the forest, will eventually come upon Soulstone Fortress, tucked far away in the mountains. Again, you can see this build in more detail in an older video. Now, leaving Soulstone Fortress and crossing over this bridge, we can see the city of Rhaenyr appear on the horizon, and this just looks so sick. I feel like I've really achieved this look that I wanted of the temple glowing in the desert. It really grabs your attention immediately, and it makes you want to go and explore it. And speaking of exploring, you can support me on Patreon and download this world for yourself. That means that you'll have access to explore everything that I've built in this world, and you might find some surprising details for yourself. Not only would you have access to this world, but you'll also be able to download and explore the other worlds that I've offered on my Patreon and shown on this channel before. So if you're interested in exploring all of the places that I've shown, as well as even more of my Minecraft projects, consider supporting me on Patreon. And I would also like to take this time to thank all of my current Patreon members. Words could never describe just how thankful I am for each and every one of you. This build has been really fun to return to and finally complete, and I hope all of you enjoyed it just as much as I did. The desert city of Rhaenyr is probably one of my favorite builds I've ever done, and I would definitely be open to even expanding it in the future or adding some more structures outside of it in the desert. Comment down below anything else you might want to see in this world or any ideas you have for future projects. Also, let me know what your favorite part of this video was. Thank you all so much for supporting me, and thank you all so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to see more content like this in the future. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see all of you in the next video.